Welcome to the WanderLearn podcast. I'm your host, Tapon. In this episode, I have Hal Urban, who is a good friend. He's also a patron of mine. You go to patreon.com/ftapon. You can also become a patron. Hal Urban has just written a new book, and it's going to be coming out in May 2021. And I had a chance to talk with him about it. It's all about the power of good news, and that is something that is very timely for this year of 2020. Already, the fact that this year has been such a tough year in so many metrics. So he's trying to get us to focus on the good news. He's written a book called Life's Greatest Lessons, which sold 500,000 copies. It's a fabulous book, and he's written many other books. He talks about the publishing process and many other things. This episode, before we get into it, we will talk about our sponsors. So stay tuned for the sponsors, and then we'll go right into the episode. Today's show is brought to you by Sawyer. Sawyer's the same guys that make the micro filters and water filters, but here's something else they do. Are you aware that Lyme disease, which is spread by ticks, is the fastest growing infectious disease in the United States and has been found in all 50 states? Lyme disease can cause neurological disorders such as Bell's palsy, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and even severe allergies to red meat. That will make you a vegan. You gotta watch out for that. Sawyer's permethrin insect repellent repels and kills ticks, mosquitoes, and more than 55 other types of insects. It is designed for shoes, clothing, backpacks, and other outdoor gear, and will even be safe for your dog. It provides an odorless barrier for protection that lasts for up to 6 weeks and can go through the washing machine 6 times. If you use Sawyer's permethrin on your shoes, that makes you 74 times less likely to be bitten by a tick. Thanks to my sponsorship, be safe out there from the coronavirus and Lyme disease. Welcome to the WanderLearn podcast. I'm your host, Francis Tapon. I'm here with Hal Urban. How are you, Hal?
I'm good, Francis.
So, Hal, you and I have known each other for many years, and you were an inspiration to me because you self-published a book that ended up becoming a bestseller, 20 of Life's Greatest Lessons, and it was eventually bought by Simon & Schuster and did very well. And you've published many books, some of them self-published, some of them traditionally published, and now here at the edge of at the threshold of 2021, you've got a new book coming out, and tell us about that.
Well, the new book is called The Power of Good News, and it's something I've thought about writing for a long, long time, but I had some other commitments, and I've also decided my last 3 books were self-published. I went back to self-publishing, and then I decided now that that's so much work that I decided to let somebody else do all the handling of the book, so I went back to traditional publishing, but I found a new publisher, and I like them a lot.
Okay, tell us about that process, about the decision-making process.
One of the things I learned in self-publishing, if you have a market, you're going to make a lot more money in self-publishing because you have the books printed. Let's say when I was doing Life's Greatest Lessons, I was having a bunch printed, and I was making, it cost me about $1 a book, and then I would sell them for 15, and so that's obviously a huge profit. The only difference is you have to pay all the money up front, and then it's a lot of work in marketing, a lot of work in storage, a lot of work in shipping, unless you get somebody else to do that. But the profit margin is really good. And then but when my first book, Life's Greatest Lessons, won an award, Writer's Digest picked it Inspirational Book of the Year, all the publishers, the mainline publishers that had turned me down before, now came back to me and wanted to publish. And I was always curious to see how it would do in the mainline publishing business. I had sold 65,000 copies of it when it was self-published, but I was curious to see how it would do, and I had a number of offers, and I went with Simon & Schuster because they had done The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and they had done the Book of Virtues. there were some other books that I really liked that they had done. So I figured, okay, I'll go with them. And so they offered me a big advance, and I took it. But the thing is, like, the book was selling for about $15. They put up the cost, but I would get about 60 cents for every one that sold. Right. So,
and a lot of people don't know that.
No.
A lot of people don't they think that when they buy a book for an author, the author gets to keep a third or something like that.
Yeah, I've asked people many times. I said, say the book sold for 15, and I would ask people, how much of that do you think I get? And they usually say half.
Right.
They think, and they're just amazed when they find out how little you get. Now, like, for instance, my new publisher gives you a little bit more, but my book is going to sell on Amazon for $18, and I will get 85 cents.
Wow. So still a fraction.
So you have
fraction.
to sell, you have to be like John Grisham or somebody like that and sell million. Well, they don't care anyway because they get such a big advance that they don't worry about. You know, like Michelle Obama probably got several million advance, and she does,
Right. But whether they sell 5 copies or 5 million, they're still happy. Either way, they never have to return the advance.
Yeah. Well, I remember it was kind of funny. I went back to New York to talk to the people at Simon & Schuster, and I said to them, because at that time I was making about $10,000 a month just off of selling the book out of my garage. Right. And it was more, I was a teacher, and that was way more money than I was making in teaching. That was probably twice as much as I was making at teaching. And so when I was sitting down with these people at Simon & Schuster, I said, I'm doing really well with this book financially.
And they were surprised.
They didn't know. They didn't know how well I was doing.
No, I know, but I think you told me once that they said, had I known how much money you were making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But anyway,
I would have told you never to sign the deal.
I told them I was doing really well with it, and I said, so you're going to have to give me a good reason to give it up, because I knew I would make less with a mainline publisher. And so the associate publisher, she said, well, I'll give you 2 reasons that you should sell it to. She said, number 1, we're going to sell way more copies than you're going to sell out of your garage. She said, number 2, you're going to make way more money. One of those was true, and one of them was not true. Okay. The first one was true. It's sold 500,000 now, and it's sold all over the world in different languages and so on. But I'm not making as much money. It's still selling, but it was okay. I don't regret the decision, because it was nice to see my book become a big seller and do well out in the marketplace. And then they signed me to do 3 more books. So I did 4 books with them, and I did get a substantial advance on each one of them. And the 3 of them have done well. One of them has not done well, but
and you're happy that you don't have to do the fulfillment of
right.
All those books. That's the big headache.
They do that, and I get royalty checks twice a year. Life's Greatest Lessons is still selling pretty well, but the royalties, they've gone down.
Sure.
And that's natural. The book is, I actually wrote that book 30 years ago, but I sold it to Simon & Schuster in, I think it was 2003 or 4, around in there.
Yeah, so about halfway through its life.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about this new book that you've written.
Yeah, okay. The new book is called The Power of Good News, and the subtitle is Feeding Your Mind with What's Good for Your Heart. In other words, what's good for your health. And I had been thinking about it for actually a really, really long time, because it goes back to something I did in school. In my teaching, we started every class with sharing good news, and it was just a real picker-upper, and that even happened kind of by accident. I was a social studies teacher in high school, and I taught classes like American government, United States history, world studies, and I always felt that there should be a current event component to make those courses more real, even U.S. history, because history, what you're supposed to do is study history to understand the present. And so there was a little homework assignment that I gave every day, and it only took 10 minutes to do it, so it was easy, it was quick, and the kids got 10 points every time they did it, if they did it right. And then what we would do at the beginning of every class, I would put like the name of a person or the name of a country or an event on the board, and I'd say, who knows about this? And we would talk about it. We'd do this for about 5 or 10 minutes. And the kids became really well informed. But one day a kid said to me, gosh, Mr. Urban, for being such a positive guy, you sure give a negative homework assignment. And I said, me? Negative? And they said something that I hadn't really given a lot of thought to. They said, well, all the news is such bad news. It's depressing, and so on. I said, yeah, you've got a point there. And then it stuck with me later that she said I give a negative assignment, and I realized we were starting every class with doing something negative, talking about the news. And this is way back in the mid to late 60s, and nothing has changed.
Right.
In fact, what has changed is that the media has more technology to bombard us with images of explosions and people dying and all of that type of stuff. So it's actually worse now.
Have you read Stephen Covey's Enlightenment Now or heard his thesis?
Oh, not Stephen Covey. Yes, I have read the book.
Stephen Covey.
Yeah.
Steven Pinker.
From the Ivy League, Harvard.
From Harvard,
I think.
Yeah.
And I also read Factfulness by Hans Rosling.
Right.
I mentioned him quite a bit in the book because he brought everybody up to date on statistics and showed you how good the world was and how it's getting better all the time and everything. And I loved that book. And Bill Gates, who reads enormous number of books, he said that was one of his favorites also.
Correct.
And so
why is it, Hal, do you think that human beings seem to have an attraction to negative news?
We're wired that way, Francis. That's one of the things I learned. We have a negativity bias. And we have I don't know how you pronounce it, amygdala. There's a little neuron or something inside our body that alerts us
to danger.
Yeah, and so and if you go all the way back, as far back as you can go in the history of human beings, they had that built into them. Remember, they're out walking around looking for food, but animals bigger and stronger and faster and meaner than them are looking for food too, which might be you, and noises will protect you. If you hear them, you see an animal coming. So it's a negativity bias, and it's a safety thing that's built into us. So negative news gets our attention. Like, for instance, I never tell people, don't stick your head in the sand and not ever watch the news. You have to know what's going on for your own safety, And so, but it's true. I still remember when I was in college, one of my classmates asked the professor, why is all the news bad? And he said, because good news doesn't sell. Bad news sells, good news doesn't. And that's still true. Right now, there are a lot of people and organizations that are trying to get more news, more good news, not only on television but particularly on the web. There are a lot of websites now. I subscribe to one called the Good News Network, and you get 4 or 5 really uplifting, positive stories every day, and they're brief. And
that's great.
And so I found a bunch of those, and I've written about them in the book.
Still, you're about to turn 80 years old.
Yes.
So happy birthday.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm wearing a mask we're face to face, and so if I sound kind of funny on the audio, that's why. But just for everybody's safety, 2020 has been, it seems to me, in my shorter life than yours, one of the worst years on record. It seems like since a long time that we've had such a negative year. How do you make sense of that? Do you still have to struggle to find the positive news in 2020, or are you getting depressed yourself?
Well, I do everything I can to avoid getting depressed. Like, for instance, I do watch the news every night. I watch Lester Holt on NBC for a half an hour, but that's about all I can take. Sometimes Kathy and I will switch over to PBS, and that's on for an hour. But I can't watch the whole thing, especially after watching a half hour. I just have to turn it off and watch something that's kind of lighthearted or something like that. But I would agree with you. As I say, I've lived 80 years. 2020 is the most down, negative bombardment year of my lifetime. I mean, we've had so many things, starting with COVID and then the shutdown or the
fires.
Not the complete shutdown, but the economy, and many people closing business and losing jobs and
the
all
fires.
that kind of stuff. All of the weather things, one being the fire and then the storms.
George Floyd.
Yeah, and then the racial things on top of that, and the political division is worse.
Election shenanigans.
Worse than it's ever been, yeah. And I'm actually, as we sit here a few days before the election, I'm concerned about what's going to happen after the election. I think we could be in for something really horrible. I hope not, but yeah. And it's, in fact, when the book comes out next May, I think a lot of people are going to assume, oh, he wrote this book because we had a year of really, really horrible news, and now he wants to come up with good news. But the truth of the matter is, and I put in the introduction, this book is not a response to 2020. I conceived of this idea a long time ago. I actually started writing it in 2018. I wrote about three chapters. I got turned down by all these publishers again with the same reason. Good news just not going to sell. People don't want to read a book about good news. And I thought it was much more about just good news. And I just, stayed with it. And one of the things I learned about the main publishing industry is if your most recent book did not do well, and I wrote a book called The 10 Commandments of Common Sense, it did not do well. Every other publisher has the numbers, and they'll see that it did a lot worse than your previous books, and you're kind of down. So I just kept shopping around, and I got turned down by a couple of agents also who said good news wouldn't sell. And then I found this Barrett Kohler, the publisher over in Oakland. They're just, I think, really outstanding, very thorough. They bring the author in as a partner. I wasn't consulted on anything when I worked with a mainline publisher before, and I've been involved in every aspect of this particular book. And so it's been a delight to work for them, and they're very thorough even in the writing of the book. I've actually wrote it 3 times. I wrote it once, turned it into my editor. Turned out it was too long. He also corrected a number of things, and then I wrote it again, made it a lot better because my editor is really outstanding.
What makes a good editor?
He just sees things that could be sharper, more clear.
Is it like a concept or like a sentence or both?
It could be both, yeah, yeah. And he got me on some quotes. I use a lot of quotes in books, and he had a couple. He said I'm a real stickler about that. He said I follow them really closely, and sometimes quotes are wrong. Like there's a famous quote attributed to Will Rogers: "Strangers are friends I haven't met yet." And I've seen that quote 100 times, and I put it in the book, but he said, no, it's not legitimate. And there are a lot of those,
oh, sure.
That go around.
My favorite one is when Abraham Lincoln said, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet."
Oh, yeah, that sounds like something Lincoln would say. So anyway, but he did ask me to shorten it a lot, and as I went through it, I had to cut about 40%, and that's a lot after all that work of writing. But I realized it got me to say something in much fewer words, which makes it more concise. And that was something that I remembered. I had a great writing instructor at USF, and he always said, when you write something, get away from it and then go back and read it later and ask yourself, can I say the same thing in fewer words?
Oh, yeah.
And
absolutely.
And
it's amazing.
So
how many words did you start off with, Hal? And then, roughly, I mean, did you have like 60,000 words at the beginning and went down to 40,000?
No, it was more than that. And I can't remember the numbers, because one of the things that I learned to do, what I don't do when I write, is I count pages, I don't count words. And my pages had more words on them than the book will have. And so when I turned it into him, he said, we've got to cut, 100, I don't know how many thousand words, but it was a lot. It was about 40% of the book.
Okay. So basically you cut it nearly in half. Wow,
yeah. So I went back through it and
that ability to cut, I think, improves with more time that's passed. So for example, I'm writing my 10th, it's the 10-year anniversary of my Hidden Europe book.
It's been that long.
And then suddenly I'm having to edit it because it's coming out in Chinese. And so I had to rewrite it, update all the stats.
Right.
I am chopping like crazy.
Right.
And I thought, with my own hubris, that I was a really tight writer. Mm-hmm. I thought, no, there's what can you cut out of this 750-page book? It's great.
Yeah.
I'm reading it now. I'm like, oh my God, cut that. I'm cutting like maybe a third of the book probably in the end. If I had a real editor, I could probably cut half.
Yeah, I guess they may all be different, because one of the things that happened with this is after I rewrote it for him, then they hire 3 outside reviewers, they call them, and all 3 of them take a crack at it. And then I get those 3 manuscripts back with all of their suggestions. It was kind of interesting. 2 of them really liked it and made some nice complimentary things along the way, along with some suggestions of things to cut or things to add or clarify or leave out or whatever. But the third person did not like the book. He said, I didn't reach my goal, and he would not buy the book. Mm-hmm. But he was the one that gave me the best advice. And he made some really good suggestions out of how to even cut more and say more and so on. I remember writing him
more with fewer words.
Yeah. And I remember writing him a thank you. He said he'd never been thanked before, but I said, even though you didn't like the book and wouldn't buy it, I said, I appreciate the professionalism with which you edited and corrected it. And I said, I think I made every change that you suggested, and the book is better because of it. So I was appreciative of the fact that my publisher, Barrett Kohler, that they did that. It was a lot more work for me, to write it again with a third time, with the suggestions of these 3 people. But again, I think the finished product is better.
Right.
Every publisher does it differently. So
break down the book a little bit to how you organized it, and it's coming out in May of 2021.
Right.
How does it look now? In other words, what should readers expect from it?
Well, both. I think 2 things. Number one, you become more aware of the effect that good news has on you. Good news is kind of a magic phrase. It's uplifting, and then the other thing is, it isn't just good news in the newspaper or on TV. It's good things happening all around you, and this includes. There's a chapter on being thankful. There's one of the things I got into while I was writing the book, and I didn't know I was going to be getting into, is called neuroscience. It's how the brain operates and what stimulates what we call the happy hormones and all of that kind of stuff. And I think one of the most valuable lessons I ever learned is something my mom taught me, was to be thankful for what you have. My mom said when I was a little kid, she said, the happiest people in the world aren't the people who have the most. The happiest people in the world are the people who are thankful for what they do have. And I really think there's a lot of wisdom in
Absolutely.
that statement.
One of my big takeaways from going to Africa is that you see people who are much happier than many Americans,
right,
with far less.
Yes.
And I'm like, you come back here, and I'm like, I'm so grateful to take a hot shower. I'm
Absolutely,
like, wow, hot. In fact, just that water comes out of the pipes reliably.
Right.
That when I flick on the electricity, it turns on like a miracle. Like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
That, that I have a car that's reliable. I have clean roads, and, just like it goes on and on. Just gratitude is such a powerful force.
It is.
We
tend,
underestimate.
Yeah, we tend to take things for granted. I remember we had 3 girls from China stay with us about 3 or 4 weeks one summer. And when I was taking them to the airport to go home, I was asking some of the things that stood out for them. And one of the girls said, "Oh, your roads." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "They're all paved."
Right.
And I mean, China is advancing enormously, and they probably have a lot more paved roads now than they did. But we take that for granted. Nobody would ever, if I said, list all the things that you're thankful for in your life that you use, and so nobody would ever say paved roads.
Right.
And that's just one of millions of things,
And just the cleanliness. I was showing Mustafa's my brother-in-law, and I was showing him a video of the view outside of a window of where I was house sitting, and he's like, "Wow, that's such a nice courtyard." I said, "It's not our courtyard. That's the street outside."
Okay.
It was just a street in San Mateo, which is a suburb. And he was just like, "What? Why is it so clean?"
Oh, yeah.
Because in Africa, you often see trash everywhere. You see just people milling about. It's dirty. It's dirt road, whatever. It's not. And he was just like, that could only be a courtyard in his mind. It could only be a private place where you.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just funny. There's a lot to be grateful for. So who's the target audience for the book?
That's a question that came up when I first proposed the book, and to me, it's anybody who enjoys reading and wants to read something uplifting, and somebody who wants to understand a little bit more about how to put positive stuff into your mind. When I wrote my second book, it's done pretty well too. It's called Positive Words, Powerful Results. It's basically about the impact that positive words coming out of your mouth can have on not only yourself but on other people. And this book actually goes back farther than that. You can only have positive things coming out of your mouth if you have positive things in your head. And how do you get positive things in your head? You either put them there or allow them to be put in, because the first chapter in this book is about what goes into your mind. And that's a main theory of the book. I was going to have that as chapter 2, but my editor wanted it to be chapter 1. Francis, you probably are familiar with a man named Zig Ziglar.
Yes, of course.
Okay, well, when I was it's probably in my early 30s, I was starting to read books. They call them self-help books. I don't like that title, and that's what this one will be called, because it's an oxymoron. You're not helping yourself. You're letting somebody who wrote the book help you, Mm-hmm. But I call them personal development books.
Right.
And I started reading a lot of books like that, whether it was The Power of Positive Thinking or How to Win Friends and Influence People, whatever. Those are very uplifting books, and they give you good ideas about how to be a better person and think more positively and so on. Well, anyway, a friend of mine said when I was first started in on this, he said, "Have you heard of Zig Ziglar?" And I thought he was joking. I thought, Zig Ziglar. And
sounds like a
fake
name.
It turned out he was a real guy. Not only was he Zig Ziglar, but he was from Yazoo City, Mississippi. And I thought that was a joke too. But anyway, he said the guy's not only written some good books, but he's an unbelievable speaker and very inspiring and so on. And it was one of those times in my teaching career. It's very, very stressful. A lot of people don't understand that, but sometimes we call in sick for what we call a mental health day. You need a day off, And Zig Ziglar was speaking over in Oakland doing an all-day workshop. And so I called in sick for one of my mental health days. And I went over there, and it was very, very life-changing day. particularly the first start of it. He came out and he told a story that I've never forgotten. He said, "Would you allow anyone to walk into your living room?" And of course, when somebody's telling a story, just like when you read a novel, your mind fills in the details, you know. And he said, "Would you allow anybody to walk into your living room with a 50-pound sack of trash over each shoulder and then dump that trash right in the middle of your living room?" And I'm getting a picture of my living room at home and somebody doing that. And I said, "My God, why is he asking this question? It's ridiculous. Nobody would ever allow that." And then he just kind of remained silent for a while because he knew people were probably thinking what I was thinking. Why would you ask such a dumb question? And he said, "Raise your hand if you would." And of course, no hands went up. And he says, "Do you allow anybody to dump trash into your mind?" And boy, that got everybody's attention. It really got mine. And then he went on and talked about how much input we take. And of course, we take in a lot more now. I've got some numbers in the book. I can't remember what they are, but they're megabytes of, stuff that we take in. And then the question was, how much of it can you control? How much of it can you keep out? And how much of it can you choose to put in? Like you can read a trashy book or you can read a good book. You choose. Or you can watch trash on TV or you can watch good stuff. You can be around negative people or you can be around positive people. And so it really made me aware of what goes into my mind. And that's chapter 1 in the book. It's based on you are what you are. Zig Ziglar's point was you are what you are because of what goes into your mind.
Very well said. So, now, Hal, I've known you for years. You're a very positive person, but you're not Superman. In other words,
right.
there's moments where you get down, where you get depressed, where you might just get frustrated or whatever. What are tricks that you use to kind of get yourself out of that, or at least to avoid the downward spiral?
Well, and I mentioned these things in the book. There are a number of things that you can do when you get down. Number one is I think I mentioned to you earlier, I work out twice a day. Everybody can't do that. But one of the
7 miles.
Well, yeah, I do. I walk 4 miles in the morning and I walk 3 miles later in the morning. But I also do a lot of other stuff too, stomach crunches and push-ups and all of that kind of stuff because my gym is closed right now. But anyway, I do know that gets the endorphins going, and I forget. There's four of them that they call the happy hormones. I can't always remember what they are, but they get those things going, and so
oxytocin might be one.
Yeah, that's one of them, and
dopamine maybe.
Dopamine, that's another one. Yeah, and so that's. If I do that every day, it's going to keep me at a pretty good level. Obviously, there are things that happen that you don't have control over that make you sad, but there are still ways to deal with it. One is to, again, be with friends that you like, or at least talk to people. They give you a lift. You can read uplifting information. You can, even music. I still remember way back, I was about 29 or 30 when I went through my divorce, and back in those days, if you were a man, you didn't get custody of the kids, and so my 3 boys were gone. They were 2, 4, and 5, and that was the worst time of my life. And I do remember at that time, one of the things that did give me a lift was Creedence Clearwater revival group. John Fogerty will always be my favorite group because every time I heard that music, it just gave me a little lift that I needed. So reading and being around people, exercising, just thinking about good things, and again, being thankful. There are a lot of ways that you can, lift your spirit. One of the things I point out in the book, I said, this is not a rah, life is beautiful and you should never be unhappy or anything like that. That would be very unrealistic, I think. But I think we like you're full of adventure and you're full of discovery, and all of that kind of stuff lifts our spirits, keeps us energized.
You think that society suffers a bit of ageism? In other words, people against old people, which is contrary to most societies on the planet, actually. At least American society, we tend to celebrate youth and tend to denigrate or at least not value older people. When you were a young pup of 20 years old, how did you see the older generation?
I was probably the same way, mainly because it's a culture that we grow up in. If you grow up as particularly an Asian culture, what two groups are the most respected people in Asia? Teachers and elderly people. And so and
now you're both of those.
Yeah, I know. And I thought, man, I should have grown up in Asia. I'd be king of the world, But it's just like I say, it's culture that we've always been that way. And I realized once I hit probably 65, 66, somewhere in there, my speaking invitations changed a lot because the young teachers didn't want to listen to somebody with this wealth of experience. They wanted to listen to younger people, and there are a lot of other ways I've experienced it too. It's our culture, and you can't really change it. I was just reading the sports page this morning where Dusty Baker, who used to manage the Giants and this year managed the Houston Astros, he's 71, and he was the oldest manager in the majors, and he said he has experienced a lot of ageism, that they think that these young guys with analytics are going to be better managers. And then, I don't know if you saw, but the Chicago White Sox just hired Rudy La Russa, and he's 76, and he will be now 5 years older than the other old guy in the in the majors, but yeah, it definitely exists, and there isn't anything you can do about it. I mean, people are amazed that I'm still speaking, I'm still writing, and so on, but I just didn't make up my mind that I'm going to stop living when I get older. Make the most out of it.
We are recording this on Halloween, and so in a couple of days is the United States election. By the time this show airs, we will have we may not have a new president, but we'll have had the election. So give your prediction for the election so that you can either gloat or not.
Well, it's hard to predict because I remember. I'll tell you what my prediction was 4 years ago. I've never been so far off in my life. I thought Trump was such a joke that I thought he won't even win one state. I mean, I said that. And I mean, he did get killed in the popular vote, but he won the election and he pulled it off. And so I'm a little more cautious now. I was just watching something this morning on the internet. There's a guy that predicted 4 years ago that he was one of the few guys that did. He predicted Trump was going to win, and he did. And so they went to him just a few days ago, and he predicted that Trump is going to win again.
Oh, wow.
And I'm hoping he's wrong. Based on all the polls, it shows that let's see, Biden needs 270 electoral votes.
So this time you think he might win more than one state?
Yeah, he will. Well,
So give me how many states he's going to win, or how many electoral.
Yeah,
throw out a number so you. I
mean, they've got the things there, and they're showing Biden with 290, and I can't even remember what Trump has, 100 and some, but there are a number of states.
So if Biden might have 290, 300 or something, that's your prediction.
Yeah, I'm just hoping it's true. I mean, I have to give them some credence in all the scientific polling that they're doing, and
which they had scientific polling in 2016.
Yeah, right. And so
I really got us far.
But I was a history teacher, and I did a lot on the research on the presidents, did my master's thesis on one of our presidents. And
Which one?
Truman.
Okay.
And I just, I hear people say he's the best president we've ever had, and my thought is he's the worst president we've ever had because he's.
You're talking about Trump or Truman?
Trump.
Okay.
He, to me, it's his character, and I've been involved in character
that's
for
very
a long
true.
time, and so
for those who don't know you, Hal is all about proper good character. I mean, it's kind of like old school values, you might say, but Trump is the antithesis of much of what you preach.
Right. But I just got an email yesterday from a guy who's written one of the classic books on good character. It's called Educating for Character, and he's a fabulous person. He's a very devout Catholic. He lives by the teachings of his faith. He's one of the nicest human beings I've ever known. And character is the ultimate for him. He's going to vote for Trump.
Okay.
And the reason is it turns out, as brilliant as he is, a PhD in developmental psychology, he's what we call a one-issue voter. He votes on one issue, and it's abortion.
Yeah.
and so he sent this thing out that it was a list of about 20 things that Trump has done for anti-abortion.
Right.
And personally, I'm opposed to abortion, but I'm not in.
You don't let that rule your life.
No,
or it's not
right,
the litmus test.
Right, and I would not tell a woman if I was making law. I would not tell her you can't do that. But whether I like it or dislike it, I'm not a single issue voter.
Right.
I want to vote for the whole thing, and I want a person who represents the United States, who cares about science, believes in science, a person who cares about the environment and believes that we're having problems with our environment, and those types of things. And again, the character. Biden has said a number of times, you know his character, you know my character.
Right.
I want a person of good character in the White House.
So since the time of Aristotle, I think, people have been saying the young generation is going to hell, where they're going the wrong way. They're degenerates. They're whatever. Certainly in the 60s, as you probably well remember, I wasn't born yet, but in the 60s, certainly with all the hippies going on and the drugs and the free sex and all that stuff, I could imagine that the old people at that time were just saying, we're going to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
What's your view of the 2020 generation?
I've never been one of those people that think my generation was the best. I just never have. I've always thought that each generation coming along makes life better in their way, and I still do believe that. I remember in the 60s I walked a very long, peaceful protest walk against the Vietnam War, and my dad thought I was some kind of communist or something.
Right.
He just couldn't, and he was a Democrat, but he couldn't understand it. And but I've just if you look at all the progress we've made in the whole world, it's the generation that come behind us that are improving on changes that were made in the past. And I don't. A lot of people my age, they're always talking about the young people coming up. But you're right. You go back to Aristotle, or they all said that kind of stuff, right. and they're going to continue to do it. Tom Brokaw wrote a book called The Greatest Generation.
That's right.
That wasn't the greatest generation. That was just his generation, and that's kind of an ego thing to say that kind of stuff. And he's one of those guys that Brokaw himself is unbelievably right wing. So final words, so people can get your book, I'm sure, on bookstores and Amazon, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it'll be. It's actually already on Amazon for pre-order. Believe it or not, the cover is
$18.
Yeah, it's about $18. But I tell my friends you can get it on Amazon. You can get it directly from me from my website, halurban.com.
Okay, and there you get to keep. Is that part of your contract that you got to purchase them at a wholesale price?
Yeah, I can, depending on how many I buy, the more I buy, the cheaper I get them, But normally I would buy them for half price.
Got it.
And so if the book sells for $18, I would buy them for $9.
Got it.
And then have to compete with Amazon's
free shipping
price.
of Amazon.
Yeah, right. And so I wouldn't be able to compete with Amazon Prime, because if you're on Amazon Prime, you don't pay for the shipping.
Sure.
And I would have to charge, shipping,
right.
but that's not too much.
Right. Very good. So that's exciting. And people can go to halurban.com to learn more about Hal, all his books. How many total books have you written?
8. This will be the 8th one, and I'm redoing my website now because I had new pictures taken, and then we haven't added the new book yet, but we will.
Okay, very good. And you have one more book at least probably in your, or you're not sure?
Yeah.
You probably said many times, that's my last book, and you couldn't decide it right
No,
away.
because I have to stay busy, and writing is it really, as you know,
energizes.
You get into it,
Yeah.
and
It's addictive.
And you feel that you're using your time productively,
Right.
and you want to, and you're also contributing something, hopefully,
Right.
And I think what I feel best about this book is I think people will enjoy it. It'll give them a lift. It'll give them some ideas about what to put into their minds.
And they came up with the cover, and you were able to input it.
We actually did 5 rounds on that cover. Probably altogether, I had originally 20 options, and then I eliminated a bunch of them, and then they came back with some new ideas, and they kept coming back. And it was supposed to go 3 rounds, but it went 5, and then it has to do with the colors and all of that kind of stuff. And I got a lot of input from a lot of people.
And the name of the book, how did you guys come up with the name?
We did a Survey Monkey.
Okay.
To see, and gave them about 3 or 4 options, and the power. I just wanted to call it Good News, but my editor, I think, wanted some additional words, and he mentioned in an email to me something about the power of good words, and I said, why don't you put that one, the power of good news? I mean, I said, why don't you put that one in as one of the titles? So we did, and then we picked a subtitle.
So give us the full name of the book.
Okay, the main title is the Power of Good News, and the subtitle is Feeding Your Mind with What's Good for Your Heart.
Hal Urban, a pleasure as always.
Thank you, Francis.
And that concludes this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we talked about, or if you'd like to comment on the show, or if you'd like to ask me a question, then go to WanderLearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is the username I use on all social media. You can also get to my website by going to ftapon.com. And here's one last reason to remember Tapon. If you like what I do and would like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. And now for 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it somewhere. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.